yeah, it never actually was clearly explained how that happened and what happened there. It just got shut down pretty quick. But I guess that there's that special test ground near the tongue of the ocean off the Bahamas, I think it is, where the sort of like the US Navy's Area 51. I forget the
Yes.
acronym for it.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yep.
And that's another exceptionally deep part of the ocean as well around there. Um,
Yeah. There are a lot of military installations where they have no sail zones. Even in New York Harbor, around the Navy Pier, they're in Middletown. That's where they have the load munitions onto the ships. And they did have nukes there until 1997. Uh, the Navy SEALs actually patrol underwater there. They have underwater patrols, they have the sensors, and of course, the Coast Guard has a major installation within about a mile and a half of it. So they're out there and they keep people away from that whole pier. It's the longest finger pier in the world. It's like two and a half miles, 2.25 miles long, and so that's definitely a no go zone. A lot of no go zones around military installations. Same thing with overflights. I mean, you can't fly over, well, even flying over certain areas where commercial flights are. You're not supposed to fly there at certain altitudes, because of restrictions. But as far as the Devil's Sea, that one I know because I've seen the chart myself. We had to use the nautical charts whenever we were transiting the Pacific Ocean or whatever, and those charts will also have the areas that are defined as places you probably don't want to go because of various things. Could be volcanic activity. The Devil's Sea, they told us it was because of the volcanic activity, but who knows? It could have been something else, like the other. There's like 6 areas supposedly that are similar to the our Devil's Sea there, if you
yeah.
Hey, Joe,
will.
The-
Yeah, John.
getting back to Jeff's video. So you had said that what we were looking at was that, the white sphere was a detonation. Was that what you had said? So
yeah,
now
very high speed photography.
yeah, so now something came off the bottom, right? That's where that white line was. So why couldn't that just be something from the detonation?
Because it's a thermonuclear device. It turns everything into plasma, and the weapon debris is obliterated. The booster that launched it there, it separated at flight time of 187 seconds, and the retro rockets on that booster pushed it back the other way. So that RV continued going up for another 14 minutes and then detonated 14 minutes after booster separation. So the booster was long gone by that time. Uh, and the and this is the part two and part three of the recovery operations. And Tim Gallaudet and his wife Karen. Karen's a US Navy diver, former US Navy diver. They've helped me look through the ship logs and actually identify the recovery operations that were conducted by the US Navy. And what was critical was ships that were had no part in Operation Dominic or Operation Fishbowl. The crews suffered radiological exposure and higher than normal. Like there was two ships called the USS Abnaki and the USS Tuscumbia. They were involved only at the last day, the very last day of Operation Dominic. And what they were doing was transporting a specialized undersea barge that had been used 7 years previously for a test called Wigwam, which was a detonation of a nuclear test, 30 kiloton at a depth of 2,000 feet. This barge had high-speed cameras and it was kitted out by EG&G to film uh, the underwater detonation. So that barge hadn't been used in 7 years. And it was just sitting around Pearl Harbor. the day after the bluegill triple prime test, they hightailed that barge out to Johnston Island, and the Abnaki was the one that towed it out there. And there was no reason for them to use that other than a salvage mission. And the Tuscumbia was actually singled out in 1976. A lot of these sailors that and service personnel that had been present in Operation Dominic started presenting at hospitals with leukemia. So the health department in the US approached the Department of Energy and said, there's something going on here. We need a full review of service personnel. So there was a company called Calm and Tempo that ran an extensive report and located every ship and every aircraft that was involved in Operation Dominic, where they were located, the dosimeters of the crews involved, and it wrote a comprehensive report in 1983, and that's where I got a lot of my data from. Now, Calm and Tempo are actually involved in Operation Dominic as part of the nuclear testing program. So they concluded that the dosimeters were faulty on everyone. The seals were bad, so that's why everyone had high counts on their dosimeters. It was complete BS, obviously, because everyone started getting leukemia. But they had to cover their own ass basically because they were implicated in what happened. But the Tuscumbia got dosed with a high dose of radiation. There was another ship there called the UNSN Point Barrow. It was a specialized ship, one of a kind of its class. It had a semi-submersible aft end that you could sort of lower into the water and recover submerged objects. It also was involved in Operation Dominic. It was just taking ionospheric tests of the solar wind that had no exposure to radiation whatsoever, no fallout. It had the second highest dosing of any ship involved in Operation Dominic. And this is the ones that were also cruising through the nuclear debris and picking up the test devices that were highly radioactive. The Point Barrow got pulled out of the water about 5 years later and recommissioned as the USNS Point Loma, and the logbooks disappeared as well. So it was like they laundered that vessel to get rid of the logbooks. And these four vessels, the USS Safeguard, the Point Barrow, the Abnaki, and the Tuscumbia, their ship logs have been digitized now, and they document the salvage operations. And that's where Tim Gallaudet, he read the logs and said, yeah, they've got this Christmas tree rig they've set up, and he provided diagrams, said, yep, this is what they're doing, because obviously he'd been in command of on watch at least of not a nuclear powered aircraft carrier, but a conventionally powered aircraft carrier. So he knew how to read ship logs. He decoded a lot of that for me and said, yeah, there's something going on here. Karen, his wife, being a diver, said, yeah, they're not documenting their dive operations properly. They've covered stuff up here. And then fortunately I was able to get a diver that went over the side, and this craft was sitting on the bottom. They didn't tell him what he was going over the side for. He was a brand new diver, just come out of the Washington Naval Yards dive school. It had moved from New Jersey down to Washington. He was a second-class diver. They sent him over the side, didn't tell him what he was looking for, and there was an actual object. He actually, when he hit the bottom, his back was to the object. And when he turned around and saw what it was, he wanted to get out of there. He asked them to come back up, and they said, you got to stay down there. You got to, touch it, see what it's like. And he put his hand out to touch this craft, and his hand actually he felt like he was getting pulled into the craft. And he had a psychological shock that he was sick inside his helmet. They pulled him up, and he had to get airlifted out to Honolulu because he was in such a bad psychological state. But what's interesting is the fact that he put his hand into the object. If you look at the insignia of the Abenaki, that changed in 1962 to a hand. Someone's hand was their ship insignia, and we think that's a quiet hat tip to everyone else on that crew that actually knew what happened.
Yeah.
And this all came about because a guy named David Noble Whitecrow, he was engraver in the US Navy. He'd actually been in Operation Dominic at the very beginning of the first two weapons tests, and those two tests were called the Adobe test and the Aztec test, and they were the actual weapons that were used in Bluegill Triple Prime. They were airdrop tests. They just needed to test the device, so they used the 200 kilos of gold as well. And he witnessed two large cylindrical UFOs. He was on the USS Finch. He was told to go on deck and observe. There was only 6 men selected to go on deck and observe this UFO. The rest of the crew are at Station Zulu, I think they call it, all hatches closed. And he was then debriefed. Condition Zulu, is it, Joe?
Dog Zebra.
Yeah.
Dog Zebra. It's, I mean, all the hatches, you maximum protection from sinking.
Yeah. So, and David Noble Whitecrow, that was 1962, April 1962. And then later on, 14 years later, he was at Guantanamo Bay Naval Base as an engraver. And he was in a bar, just, nothing much else to do on Gitmo. And he met this chief petty officer. He was fairly drunk, but he was about to retire. And Whitecrow said, "Oh, what are you going to do when you get out of the Navy?" And this guy said, "Oh, I'm going to write a book about my experience diving on a downed UFO." And Whitecrow says, "Do you mind if I come around later on next week and talk to you about this?" Because he'd had his own experience in the Adobe and Aztec tests. So he went round a week later to this chief petty officer's house because they was having a barbecue because he was retiring. And even though the guy was pretty drunk the night he met him at the bar, he remembered David Whitecrow. He goes, "Oh, you thought I'd forgotten you, didn't you?" And he goes, "Come in here, I'll show you." And he had a box of all his paperwork, everything that he'd described what happened. He got airlifted out to Honolulu after the event. He was in hospital for 6 months, and then he got back on his feet and got back into the water and recovered. And he was about to retire, and 4 days after he met with David Whitecrow, and because this guy was a chief petty officer, he had a yeoman as well, and the yeoman was helping him type up the transcript of this book that he was going to write on Gitmo. And David Whitecrow actually bunked with this guy. He was in the shower room and that. And this young yeoman, only 3 days after David Whitecrow had met the chief, the yeoman died, and then 3 days after the yeoman died, the chief died in an electrical accident. So I've managed to identify who that chief was. The family don't want his name revealed because they don't want the attention because his sister's still alive. It was obviously traumatic, 1976 when he died, but I managed to get that guy's records. And there's a very strange thing that has in his records. On October 27, it says he was on annual leave. And then from November 14th till July 1963, at time not served is written in his record file. But in his awards and medals, he got awarded a thing called the Embarkation Medal for Cuba. And there was a specific, and this was for the Cuban Missile Crisis, the US naval blockade. Now, to get that medal, you had to do 30 days continuous service between October 24 and December 30, 1962. His service record said he was on leave and from the 24th to the 27th, they were the only 3 days he was actually supposedly on active service, but yet he got a medal for action in the Cuban Missile Crisis. And you can see on the records, the lieutenant that's actually typed it up has said, I'm only doing this because my CO has told me to. He's actually written that on the guy's record. So there's a very, very big anomaly in the gentleman's records.
So you think that did he go to Johnston Island or?
Yep, for the special recovery mission.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, fabulous.
Yeah. I did have a question. Early on in the video, I believe, was it mentioned that the tag-along was spherical, or the object that was being recovered by the diver who ended up with the frightening experience, was that described as a spherical object?
It was cylindrical. It was bigger than an aircraft carrier. He said at the time, yeah.
Oh, really?
Mm.
And then
it was massive, and they were trying to figure out how to salvage it.
But it took off, right? Did
yeah,
somehow...
yeah.
Now, was that reported in any formal messages, with the daytime group and all of that, when you were going through the records?
Well, it ties in with what David Whitecrow was told by the chief. The chief went to Honolulu Hospital. The Abnaki only stayed at Johnston Island for a week and then headed back to Honolulu. And there's actually a photo of the Abnaki in Pearl Harbor on November 15th. And the chief said that the rest of the crew come and visited him in hospital and said, we measured it, we were trying to figure out how to salvage it, and then all of a sudden it lifted off under its own power at night, had emitted a bright blue sort of glow that lit up the whole seabed, and then it disappeared at high speed underwater. And that ties in with the ship logs, because the barge, the special barge they used at Wigwam was called YFNB 13. They towed that back to Pearl Harbor on the 11th of November. So it ties in with, they raced all these assets out to Johnston Island and then suddenly turned around and brought them back. And we've documented that in the ship log. So David Noble Whitecrow's story, I think Richard Dolan has documented a bit. What he has said publicly on the YouTube video lines up exactly what we found with the logbooks. But like your experience, Joe, with the spherical ones, I know for a fact that the Go Fast video, if that continues on for another 5 seconds, that object does a 90-degree right angle turn. And Chris Mellon said it. Admiral Gallaudet was asked that question at the SCU conference in 2023, I think it was. And the answer he gave, because it's classified information, it was on the CyberNet when his email that he saw it, the footage, and then the next day it got wiped from his account. So he gave a very diplomatic answer. He's not going to reveal that information, but those objects, like the spherical fleet of them, you hear the gimbal video guy saying there's a whole fleet of them looking at the ASA. So those orbs that you saw are some type of reconnaissance vehicle used by the visitors or whoever they are. And they pair up and can, separate. They fly in pairs, they fly in cubes, they fly in arrow-shaped formations. They're spotted all around the world.
Yeah, same thing with the red orange spheres. You can see 18 or 20 of them in a clip. What we have right here in New Jersey. I mean, they're so common. It's almost strange if you don't see them.
Yeah.
One other question: the Whiskey 31 warhead. The only one that was actually tested on a Nike Hercules was from Johnson Island. It was one of those tests, wasn't it? One of those
Yep. I
series.
think that was tightrope, maybe.
Okay, that was a 20 kiloton, I believe.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That was, I think that might have been the actual last US atmospheric test on November 3, I believe it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
1962. Yeah.
Interesting. I guess it worked. So because they deployed enough of
Yeah.
those, they deployed enough of those things.
And the follow on from the bluegill triple prime was SDI, the Excalibur system that used hot X-rays, and instead of, I think it was a nuclear warhead that produced the X-rays, but it then distributed them through these focusing rods to destroy incoming ICBM. So that was the follow-on for bluegill triple prime was SDI.
Oh, okay. Oh, so they were actually producing a particle beam to do the destruct.
Yeah. Yep. You hear of X-ray pumped lasers.
Yeah.
Rather than using nuclear devices to generate those high energy X-rays, they still use the Bremsstrahlung processor, and most X-ray machines do. Instead of gold, they use tungsten, but it's just the same effect.
This is, I mean, it makes the reason that there was so much UFO activity surrounding these things. Also, all the space shots. I mean, it's all tied together. At least
Yeah.
in somebody's mind's eye. So
Yeah.
it's good. All right. Any other questions? We have a bunch of people out there. Any comments about nuclear weapons, about nuclear war? Come on. I know you all have questions. Stanley Nazemic, I'm going to throw the ball to you.
It's interesting listening to it. Interested in the sphere that you saw off your ship when you were out there. Could you tell us a little more about it? The size of it?
Basically, what it was is 5:30 in the morning, around roughly 5:30 in the morning is when the captain determined it was time to shoot morning stars. So we all grabbed our equipment. I grabbed the stopwatch. My chief grabbed the stopwatch, and the OD and the captain grabbed their sextants. And we're all out on the starboard bridge wing, just looking forward. And we actually picked up the object, and it was probably over a mile or so away, and it kept coming directly towards us. So we were traveling at about 15 knots, I guess, heading back towards Honolulu, and this thing was closing on us rather quickly, probably doing 50, 75 miles per hour. And after a short while, it closed. The captain, who was the senior captain in the Coast Guard, he was a senior '06, and he was a master mariner. He spent 30 years at sea already. And so he dropped his sextant. He's looking at the thing along with the OD and my chief and myself, as well as the lookout up on the flying bridge. So we're watching it as it closed on us. And then, as I said, it passed. You marveled at how bright it was. I mean, how shiny. It was like a mirror. It was, polished mirror. And then it passed us on the other side of the masts and the stacks and disappeared astern of us. So all we saw was that there was no markings on it whatsoever. There was nothing other than the reflection of what I described, the sea below and the sky above. Made no sound. There was no humming. There was no sound whatsoever. And I figured, well, the captain reported. We had to go through and formally report the objects that we saw during the Apollo mission. I believe it was the JANIPS 146E is our overarching document. So you fill out a sit rep. In that case there, the radio officer was an ensign. He came up to the bridge. The captain signed off on the sit rep. The officer took it back down to the radio shack. And then we never heard anything more about it. We were not debriefed, which is kind of interesting because I believe the documentation, if they follow Janus 146, I believe it needed to be some type of debrief of anybody had observed the object. But the captain didn't really care too much about that. He just signed off on it. Now, it was a year later, after I came back from Pearl Harbor, I pulled one more Ocean Station Victor patrol. That was an interesting one, not for UFO activity, but for some other things. And then I came back and they sent me to schools at Pearl Harbor. I went to a couple of the A schools that they had on Ford Island. And I stayed there for about 3 months going to these classes. And during that time, I made friends with the Navy yeoman. Now, I've come to the conclusion, based upon what you said about that yeoman chief, I think yeomen know everything there is to know about what's going on in the Navy and the Coast Guard. Well, anyway, so I used to play tennis with this Navy yeoman after work. And one day I told him about the 3 sightings that we had on board my ship, and he started laughing. I said, oh, he thinks I'm a UFO nut. He said, no, he said, I'm laughing because we get thousands of those reports every year just from U.S. military aircraft and ships. So, and he said, thousands, that's a direct quote, thousands every year. So I keep thinking about the disclosure that we're having now, and I'm waiting for them to really to dump the whole ball of wax. That was 1970 that he told me. That was a year after Blue Book was finished. So those reports are still coming in. They're still formally being reported. And a lot of the captains actually follow the procedures right to the end. And that means debriefing, and you're not supposed to divulge anything if it's classified nature, all that good stuff. So, you know, and that yeoman worked for something, an organization called FICPAC, which was Fleet Intelligence Central Pacific. And it was a big computer building on Ford Island, no windows. I think they had IBM 360 computers at the time, which were kind of state of the art. And he was a yeoman there, so he could have been data entry or data processing or whatever. So, and also Bobby Ray Inman was a lieutenant commander at the time, also stationed at Pearl Harbor. And of course, he was ONI, Office of Naval Intelligence. So, I mean, if you want to connect the dots, which is something that Nick Curto is very good at, connecting the dots on all these things, it gives you quite a compelling story or an image of what really may be going on, and maybe brings us a little closer. Geoff, thank you for bringing out all the things that you brought out, because again, these are those tidbits of information that, you know, until we get full disclosure from all the formal sources, all we can do is kind of stitch these things together and think we are getting close in our own right. So thank you.
You think that disclosure will be coming soon?
Define disclosure.
Telling us what we need to know, what we want to know.
Well, if we want to know everything, I doubt if we'll ever see everything. Geoff, you have any insights into that?
I'm sort of delving into the Majestic documents like right now.
That's fascinating. Geoff has really found some interesting stuff there. Go ahead, Geoff.
We're going to do an interview with Ross Coulthart possibly tomorrow about some of the new discoveries we found. And it was interesting you mentioned JNAT 146E, I think it is.
Echo, right.
The E, yeah, the E was added after Admiral Hillencotter retired and then started talking. So they added the E for the Espionage Act to stop that from happening.
Yeah.
Because that was a big problem for them. There's just too many things in the Majestic documents. Some of them are probably fake, but the majority of them are real. And we've just, even yesterday, I've just found references to reports that turned up in the Majestic documents, but then don't appear until the reports are declassified like 10 years later. So they couldn't just be forgeries where someone's guessed report numbers. There's only two possibilities. They're genuine, or someone in the CIA with a high level of clearance had access to these documents and then potentially made them for counterintelligence purposes. But at the time they were made, the Soviet Union had collapsed. So the only target of the counterintelligence effort was the people of the United States, which is a problem.
Yeah.
So
this
yeah.
was after 88 or 89 when the fall of the Soviet Union.
Hey, Geoff,
Yeah.
I've got a question since we're talking about disclosure. Yesterday, Vice President Vance made a comment that he believes the contact portion is that people are having is spiritual, I'll add interdimensional, and most likely demonic. What do you think about that?
That's what one of the sources of the Majestic documents was a guy named Scotty Myler, who was Jim Angleton's right-hand man. He wrote a memo called the Important Memo in 1999, and that's exactly what he said. This is biblical. If you want to know the answer, read the Bible. And I think it doesn't matter if it's true or not. It's what people believe. And you've just seen the second most powerful person in the world say that. Exactly. That's what he thinks all this is about. That is biblical. And, I guess 2,000 years ago when humans saw some of these things, they did, was beyond anything they could comprehend. So they did write their eyewitness accounts in either the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, everything else. So it's very possible.
But do you think that the craft that people are seeing, are they physical, or they manifested, or is the craft not even related to the abduction and the contact that people have?
Well, I guess it's like if they're like fourth dimensional, it's very hard for us in a three-dimensional world to imagine how a fourth dimension would interact in our world. It just seems like they're running behind schedule at the moment. They think that something's coming, returning back in 2030. I think Ezekiel said that in the book of Ezekiel that after the Israelites return to their homeland 70 years later, Jesus will return. And if you use 1948 as the creation of Israel, that the timeline is 2018. So maybe they're behind schedule now and making up for lost time. I'm not sure.
The UFOs are behind schedule?
Well, there's something coming back. Whatever the distances are between the star system, I don't think they're from within our solar system. I think they're from another star system completely. But they were forward reconnaissance vehicles in the 40s and 50s, possibly. The main force might be heading our way and due in the next couple of years, potentially. And I think it's sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If people have studied these things their entire life and read the book of Revelations and the end times and everything else, that's what the Majestic documents sort of say, that Roswell 1947 and even Magenta 1933, the Nazis made some discoveries out of that. Guglielmo Marconi was the head of RS-33. He was in charge of the scientific investigation. He died in 1937, and Enrico Fermi took over. And then Enrico Fermi won the Nobel Prize in 1938 and skipped the country and went to America and became the chief of Manhattan Project. Now, if you read Nuclear Hostages by Barney O'Keefe, O'Keefe says that in 1935, every scientist in the world was looking the wrong way. They were looking for nuclear fusion. The Germans were obsessed with heavy water, and O'Keefe called it the 5-year miracle, and he said it was like a supernatural force was stopping the scientists from discovering nuclear fission. They were just obsessed with fusion. And he said in his book, which was published in 1983, he said if the Germans had realized they should have been chasing fission rather than fusion, London and Paris would probably have been part of an atomic attack, because they couldn't understand why every scientist, even Neil Bohr, Hans Bethe, and Enrico Fermi himself were looking the wrong way. They were looking for nuclear fusion, and that's probably what they found in Magenta. And a lot of the very early Majestic documents identify a torus made of clear crystal with a clear fluid in it, which they thought was heavy water, with like big magnets around it. And there's actually Los Alamos tried to emulate this device, and it's called a stellarator, and they called it the Perhapsatron S4. This is all unclassified documentation now. Now that's an early fusion reactor. Now they built this, only 5.5 years after detonating the Trinity test. So they were trying to emulate stuff they'd found in Magenta, Roswell, and whatever they found in Roswell participated the creation of Israel. James Angleton, in his church committee testimony, said that he was part of the negotiations for the creation of Israel. And that was James Angleton was actually in Milan in 1933 as a 17-year-old, because his father was the franchisee for international cash registers. He'd gone to Milan to build the factory there to make cash registers. So they possibly heard and saw the light show on the Saturday night in June 13, 1933. And Angleton's middle name was Jesus, because his mother was Mexican and she was a staunch Roman Catholic. They had very tight connections with the Cardinal Ilfonso Schuster of the Cardinal Milan, who was also the head of the Knights of Malta at the time. The Knights of Malta had been kicked out of Malta by Napoleon, and were very, it's a country. The Knights of Malta is actually a country that can issue passports. They've got a small office in the Vatican. That's their entire holding, is an office in the Vatican. They can issue passports. That's how most of the paperclip scientists escaped Germany. They got issued passports by the Knights of Malta. And Angleton was pivotal in the creation of Israel. He looked after the MJ compartment for the CIA. And, Scotty Myler, who was Angleton's right-hand man, said that after the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in 1947, that sort of accelerated the need to create the state of Israel. And mandatory Palestine, British were having trouble keeping the Israeli Irgun forces under control there. They were taken aback by the rapidness of the creation of the state. This is basically what the Majestic documents say.
Are you familiar also with Lord Hill Norton, his report on UFOs? I mean, this information has been out there for a long time, that this stuff is paranormal and demonic. And, all the years, 20 years I spent with MUFON, now one word about Lord Hill Norton's report, about, the stuff we're discussing here. But, for the others who don't know, Lord Hill Norton did a report, or you could tell them, Geoff, that they're very concerned that it was demonic.
Believe that Hill Norton was the source for Dorothy Kilgallen as well.
Yeah.
And she worked for the CIA.
Yep. Until they got rid of her.
Yeah, until they got rid of her. What a
you know your stuff. I can tell you that much, Geoff. You don't got to look this stuff up. You know your stuff. I'm impressed.
My wife says I know it too well.
Yeah. Well, don't get obsessed with it. That's another thing they say, It's good to be curious, but don't get obsessed.
Okay. Any more questions? Who has questions? I know you're all smart people out there with a lot of questions.
I'd like to say something.
Who's
Millie.
oh, Millie, how you doing? Sure, absolutely. Go ahead.
Hi, Joe. Hi, everybody.
Hey,
Uh, about 2 weeks
Millie.
ago on the Fox News, I heard that President Trump was going to disclose about UFOs on July 8th.
hmm,
Mm.
July 8th.
Uh-huh.
Oh, that what
Hmm.
the 250th?
Right after it, 4 days after.
Uh,
I'm thinking it's July 8th because of Roswell was July 7th.
Yeah, good point.
good point. But I don't think he's really a believer, though. I think he's
Oh,
toying.
Trump?
Yeah,
Trump?
I don't think he's a I don't think he's a big true believer. I'll put it that way.
I agree with you, Joe.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, it's good to have somebody that'll drag an anchor from time to time to, just keep us on track a little bit, keep us sharp.
Or whether he believes or not, if he does the disclosure, that would be good.
Okay, well, let me be devil's advocate here, John. My apologies. My guess is that the disclosure, first of all, presidents do not need to know everything there is to know. And that's been part of an ongoing argument for a long, long time.
Mhm.
Jimmy Carter was not granted permission to find out about a lot of the top secret UFO related items. He was told as such, I think, by George Herbert Walker Bush, who was the head of the CIA at one point. So the need to know is something, especially when you get into those special access programs. They have so many levels of top secret. I don't think anybody really knows how many levels there are. Jeff, you have
Timothy
any?
Good said there were 50 levels above top secret.
It could be more than that or less. The whole thing about having a code word in order to get to a certain piece of top
Sure.
secret data, so how many code words can there be? So yeah, I agree. 50 levels seems like probably a good number to determine that the president probably does not fit any one of those top 50, you know, unless you were the head of the CIA at one time and then you got read in on most of the things, maybe, but still, maybe not all, you know. So it's kind of how many angels can dance on the head of a pin.
Yeah.
I think so. Disclosure means many things to many people. What they ultimately are going to be disclosing, they'll probably feel that they're disclosing everything that should be disclosed, but it may not be everything that we want to have disclosed.
Well, Jeff started the program by talking about inhabitable planets. And I just want to bring to your attention, a study said there was printed in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science that in our Milky Way galaxy, there are 40 billion planets capable of supporting life.
Yep.
Okay. Now, that's another foundational stone to get people prepared for this. And they also said that our solar system is at the outer edge of the Milky Way galaxy. There's parts of the Milky Way galaxy that are 4 to 5 billion years older than the outer arm.
Yep.
That's a lot of room for evolution and also for neighbors.
Yeah. The other interesting, well, Frank Drake, the Drake equation, I think
Yep.
that the number he came up with was obviously going to be much smaller. I think he came up with about 8,000 Earth-like planets, but he was only looking at carbon-based Earth, and he was also looking at yellow dwarfs.
Yes.
Our sun is a yellow dwarf. Well, it
Yep.
turns out that there are twice as many red dwarfs throughout the known universe, and they are capable of having Goldilocks zones and being able to support life, all things being considered, in the atmosphere. But then again, if it's not carbon based, it could be silicon based life.
Sure.
Be electric. Now they believe electricity could be a sentient being.
Yep.
Like they have the objects that they see in space, bursts of energy that they think may actually, in fact, be some form of life.
Or the orbs that people often see as UFOs, the green or the orange,
Yeah,
orbs. Like what could that be, And
yeah. No, absolutely. Good point. Good point.
They're not always like metal UFOs. Sometimes they're this strange thing.
So I guess
They could
you
be
could say
plasma.
that,
They could be plasma.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we're only limited by our imaginations about what could be true for the universe. And again, that's in God's domain. So whether you believe
Yeah.
him or not, that's where.
Well, that study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science said 1 in every 5 planets in the solar system is capable of supporting life. That's pretty significant. 1 out of 5 in every solar system.
Well, let's see. I think they believe now that there was some type of a nuclear exchange on Mars that ended up, kind of doing that planet in, because they found a. I'm going to defer to Bruce Cornett on this one. They found some form of radiation that could only come from a nuclear explosion.
Xenon-129 isotope.
Yep.
And Dr. John Brandenburg is the one who discovered all of that when he was working for the government labs. Yep. Also, how many of you have seen this information that's been put out there? I don't know how true it is, but it seems to be very suspicious. Pictures taken from some of the rovers seem to show life on Mars, such as insects with 6 legs, and also a reptile with scale and compound eye. So I don't know if that's real or not, but
nowadays with AI, we don't know what real is anymore. You're right, though. The same thing with the doors. They found some type of a structure that had a door-like structure.
Yes.
And also something that looked like a vehicle.
Well, my friend Scott Stride, that works for JPL, says that we can't go to Mars and inhabit Mars because of all of the toxic elements that are within the soil. And we can't grow plants on Mars because those plants will absorb that material, and then we will get them and we'll be poisoned.
Yeah.
One last question for Geoff. Geoff, since you talked about Johnson Island and the GE Mark reentry vehicles, I did a research paper in 2015 with an engineer, and we took a real good look at the GE Mark II launched in 1965 from Johnson Island, and we're convinced that one of them went off. Well, the records show one went offline on December 7th. We think that was the Kecksburg crash a few miles from my house, because it was a polar launch, came around, and it went offline immediately, an eighth of a mile. We believe that was what crashed in Kecksburg. Any thoughts on that possibility?
Yeah, with the GE, the Mark II models, they, as you probably know, used copper as a heat sink.
Absolutely,
slow
glows green.
flying. Yeah. So during Operation Fishbowl, they realized as they were setting up that a large amount of copper present in a weapons test like Bluegill Triple Prime would stop the Bremsstrahlung radiation effect from occurring. So initially they decided to try and launch them back to front, so the copper shield would be facing outwards, and then they realized that they couldn't do that. So General LeMay was very interested in the concept, even though he hated missiles because he was a bomber man. He was in charge of these new Avco model re-entry vehicles, which were phenolic resin. So they didn't use copper as the heat sink to absorb the friction re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. They actually ablated on this phenolic resin, and the char actually insulated the heat. LeMay was involved. He had oversight as the Chief of Air Force on, these Avco re-entry vehicles. So he actually approved the use of the Avco Mark IV for both Starfish Prime and the Bluegill Triple Prime and the Kingfish shot as well. So that was a large part of the study. And that they're not really sure where they made the discovery of the high energy X-rays. Actually, what it does, if you've got, say, that's the heat shield coming in. If that's steel or metal, if you get high energy X-rays coming in here, it works through the interior and it heats it up so quickly that it can't expand quick enough to match the heat input. And what happens is it blasts pieces of metal off the inside. It's called thermomechanical spallation. And what that does in a nuclear warhead is either destroy the device, so it either doesn't work at all or the yields diminish significantly. That report that discovered that was guys by the name of the Latter brothers, who were physicists in the Department of Energy, and they were Rand Corporation physicists as well. And they leaked the paper. Well, they don't know how. It just Rand used to write papers and circulate amongst the scientists to generate discussion. And somehow this hot X-ray report got leaked. So that turned the bluegill triple prime test on its head. So they had to get new re-entry vehicles, and B had to sort of figure out how they were going to maximize the effect of the X-rays on incoming ICBMs. So yeah, that's a good point that you brought up about the GE
Mark II.
And yeah.
Well, think about this now. There were green fireballs over New Mexico in the late 50s. Dr. La Paz was trying to figure out what they were. I believe those were the testings of the GE Mark II. And because that copper alloy heat shield glowed green, I think that's what that was 5 years earlier.
Yep. Very probable, from White Sands or something.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
All right.
Well, here's a question.
I'm impressed.
Okay. Here's a question. I am assuming that regular meteors, if they have the copper or whatever the mineral was that glow green when they re-enter the atmosphere, doesn't necessarily have to just be a re-entry vehicle. It could be a regular meteorite too, correct? Because we had one here off in New Jersey, flying over New Jersey back in the 60s.
Do meteors glow green? I'm not sure they do.
Oh yeah, green, and it had a red center, and it trailed white smoke.
Well, I guess the question would be, if it was a meteor in Kecksburg, why bring I mean, how many times have 40 military people showed up to recover a meteor? I mean, it wasn't a meteor.
Right. My stepson, from his bedroom window in Red Bank, New Jersey, told me about one morning he saw a green meteorite descend over the area that would be White Sands in 1995.
Well, I guess New Mexico had a lot of green meteor activity or green fireball activity. It was written about in a lot of reports on it, but well, the Kecksburg one, that one had actually changed course, correct?
Yes.
Correct, John?
Yeah, because those GE Mark IIs had a weight and balance system that they could send a radio signal, shift the weight, and it would bank off of the heavier atmosphere. And what I read in one of the reports was the general said they could get that to crash land within 100 yards of where they wanted it to.
Interesting.
So there's aspects of Kecksburg that it can't be a meteor. It banked, it did a few things.
Yeah.
It had it looked like a 4-pointed star because it had 4 jets on it for when it was in the upper atmosphere. I mean, there's a lot of things that matched up to the GE Mark II, but I just wanted to see what Geoff thought about that.
Starting to sound a lot like 3-Eye Atlas.
Or Third
I
Eye.
just wanted. Sorry, Nick had his hand. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, 3-Eye Atlas, of course. Avi Loeb. He's been. They discovered it last July, and it's been exhibiting certain characteristics that were not what you would normally expect from a regular, celestial visitor. So there was some thought that there's a scale of 1 to 10. And, the more checks that you get, the closer it gets to being intelligently designed. It never made it to intelligently designed. I think it stopped at like 4 out of the 10. So they believe that it is, in fact, an extraterrestrial visitor, which was a very, very large chunk of material. But it was acting. It had jets on it, and had the comet tail points towards the sun instead of away from the sun. So there are a bunch of things, and Navi Loeb has been reporting on it on basically a weekly basis. But it's been dropping off a lot of material, and they think that some of that material, because we finally crossed the path that 3I Atlas was on as it headed out towards Jupiter. And they think now that we're going to be getting a lot more activity with meteorites entering the atmosphere. Because at one point they thought that 3I Atlas, if it was intelligently designed, may be dropping off drones as part of a scientific method of finding out what's going on in our solar system. So that was 3I Atlas, but it looks like it really is a comet.
Yes.
Okay, hey Harry, how you doing? Got it. Oh, you're muted. Any questions, comments?
No questions. Just to go back a point, in the Urantia book, which was published in 55, they already talk about electrical beings, which I thought was kind of interesting when you mentioned it.
That is interesting.
Yes.
What does it say about them, Harry?
Just they're listing different type of beings that exist throughout our universe, and electrical happened to be one of them. And just worked out very well with here that I'm thinking, electrical? How would you have electrical beings? And thankfully, you guys described it.
Glad we could help. Okay, Mindy Gerber, how about you? What do you got, Mindy?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Geoff. Thank you, Joe. This
Hey,
is so
Mindy.
interesting. Frank, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Geoff, I do have a question. What country or countries were involved with Project Dominic?
Only the US. I think the British allowed the use of Christmas Island in the Pacific initially, and halfway through they got cold feet, and most of the action transferred to Johnston Island. The British tested nuclear weapons in Australia as well, but they were told they couldn't use devices that would lead to thermonuclear weapons. They were mostly just fission weapons. But we know from a guy named Harry Turner, who wrote a very famous UFO report in 1971 that it's been declassified. It was declassified in 2012, but was only digitized in maybe 2020, possibly. And he's got a chronological step-by-step process of what the CIA did, because he was the head nuclear scientist for Australia. He was the one that mentioned the Espionage Act addition to the Jane Act 146 legislation. And he was saying that the Australians were not allowed to be present when the British had their weapons tests at Maralinga and off the coast of Western Australia, Montebello Islands. And we've now found from declassified information the reason that no Australians were allowed there was because they were actually testing the thermonuclear trigger device that initiated the fusion reaction. They didn't actually test a thermonuclear device, but they tested the trigger, and they were expressly forbidden from doing that. So even though we're a Commonwealth country, they still didn't trust us that much to share us the information with Australia. So the US, because Q clearances, most of the information's no fawn, so only for US citizens only that are cleared to that level. You're not allowed to. And we saw this with General Twining's memo. He wrote a secret memo that said that UFO phenomenon is very real and not fictitious or visionary. And that was shared amongst the Allies, UK, Canada, and Australia. And we know this because Harry Turner's report in 1971 actually quoted that verbatim. The Twining memo was declassified in 2003, but the real no-fawn report was Twining's White Hot report. That was the one that's a majestic document, was given to Harry Truman on the 19th of September 1943 on a Friday. Truman had it over the weekend, and one of my research colleagues found Harry Truman's diary from the 21st of September, which was a Sunday, and he simply writes in his diary, "I have many strange things facing me." And he signed the White Hot report on the 23rd of September, which was a Tuesday, and implemented the National Security Act of 1947 the next day. CIA was created. A special panel by the president was initiated in September. So the way Twining has written two reports, a secret one for dissemination, it's sort of plausible deniability. If the secret ever got out, the UK and Canada and Australia would sort of say to the Americans, "Oh, you didn't tell us about this." It's plausible deniability with a secret report, doesn't go into very much detail, whereas the White Hot report goes into everything. The propulsion units, it's got that nuclear device, the torus with the heavy water inside and the coils of wire wrapped around it. It goes into everything, even descriptions of the beings that were piloting it. So yeah, it's the nuclear aspect that they've reused the Manhattan Project compartmentalization for the UFO subject matter as well.
You know, it's fascinating that all these things have been out there over the years, but they've been so hidden away, either accidentally or on purpose. For instance, right here at Camp Evans, part of Fort Monmouth, Camp Evans was also part of the Manhattan Project. And that's where they developed the fuse mechanisms for the devices that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And that was also what was stolen by the Rosenbergs. That's what they turned over. He actually worked for the Army at Fort Monmouth between 1940 and 1945. And then he came back as a civilian contractor, I guess, in 46. Like I said, a lot of fascinating stuff. Also, the rumors have it, coming from actually fairly decent sources, that some of the reverse engineering had taken place right there at Fort Monmouth, Camp Evans specifically, but also at the Bell Labs, which is where Colonel Corso apparently turned over some of his holdings to Homedale, New Jersey. That's where the transistor was invented, and the Big Bang Theory came out of there. Matter of fact, Robert Wilson still hangs out at what is known as Bell Works. So, I mean, this area is when you see or hear about UFOs, there shouldn't be a lot of surprises because the area is so rife with so many things. Just for instance, the Navy Pier, within 15 miles of that Navy Pier, there were 60 Nike Hercules nuclear tipped missiles surrounding it within a 15-mile area. So, and then the largest collection of Beaumark Bs was McGuire Air Force Base. They had 89 of them there, and they had 5-kiloton warheads. So, like I said, and to this day, even though the nuclear plants have been shut down and most of the devices have been removed, the nuclear weapons and everything, still we have a lot of activity. So apparently they know something that the rest of us don't, or something like that.
Well, it's been said that 40% of the seeded technology out of Roswell was at Bell Labs. 40%.
I believe it. Well, Frank, you gave me Jack Sarfati's thing when I was meeting with Bob Lucky.
Yes.
And Lucky, even though he said it cryptically, he pretty much verified everything that you're saying is true. You know, he basically verified it without coming right out and admitting it. So
much is still hidden regarding what happened at Bell Labs, Joe. It's got to be a heck of a history there.
Oh, I mean, just the stuff we know about is pretty. I mean, laser technology, fiber optics, Velcro.
Yep.
The transistor was not from Roswell. That I was assured by a physicist. Okay. But it could have come from one of the other crashes that took place. You know.
Yes.
Cape Girardeau or the Battle of Los Angeles. Supposedly, something was brought down there. So.
Yep.
There was more than one Roswell crash.
That's right.
There were two. Yeah.
That's right. Yep.
But they were within a close time proximity, I believe.
But not spatially. They were separated quite a bit.
Yeah. But supposedly some of the key components. Now, I'm not sure I totally believe what that physicist told me. First of all, they actually had a transistor, an operating transistor, at least transistor-like device back in the 1920s. And of course, right there at Bell Labs, they developed television there back in the 1920s. And of course, our friend who developed international radio, Marconi, has his hotel. He was there before the Army took it over. So all that stuff's been going on for years. So interesting though. Oh, okay. Who hasn't participated yet? Oh, there he is. Nick, I knew you were out there someplace.
I am. I'm here. First, Geoff, thank you so much. Such a wonderful program. A couple of quick things. The idea that the Nazis were helped by ETs. The story that Eisenhower had a visit on an airfield with ETs. Is any of that, as far as you know, true?
When you look at, Adolf Hitler became rather overconfident, I think, trying to fight the Allies and the Russians at the same time. And I've got a book here called U-Boat 977. This was the one that surrendered in the River Plate in 14th of August 1945. Hans Schaefer was the captain. And this book here was printed in 1954 when the Berlin was starting to fall, and Schaefer got his mission to go to Argentina for whatever reason. It took him 3 months to get there. He decided to catch a train into Berlin to see his mum for the last time. And he said on the train on the way in, there was an SS officer that just simply would not stop talking about the miracle weapons that, that was going to win them the war. And he annoyed Schaefer that much that Schaefer looked him up the next day in Berlin and got taken around, was shown a death ray, photos of fantastical devices, he called them. And this SS officer, this was April 25th, 1945, so the war was nearly over, and this SS officer was adamant that the miracle weapons would save them, and I think they were expecting help from celestial visitors, and that's what Herman Oberth said. He goes, we didn't figure all this stuff out for ourselves, we had help. And I think for whatever reason, the Germans were abandoned by the people that they'd been in contact with, or the visitors, for whatever reason. So the miracle weapons and that's why the Alsos mission went in straight after the war was still going. President or John F. Kennedy, the president, accompanied James Forrestal in July 1945, chasing the miracle weapons, and You know, you had the Officers of Naval Research were in there, the Army with the ALSOS, the Army Counterintelligence Corps. Henry Kissinger was debriefing the Nazi scientists at the underground facility at Obermagau outside of Munich, which was the Messerschmitt factory. And that's where Paperclip came from. Alan Dulles was getting information from Admiral Canaris, who was the head of the Abwehr, the Nazi intelligence. During the war, Dulles was getting information directly from Canaris. And Dulles was also the guy that received the Charno diaries from Etta Charno. Her husband was part of RS-33. He was married to Mussolini's daughter. He wrote a diary. He got executed by the Germans toward the end of the war, and his wife smuggled the diary out of Germany into Switzerland, and the first person she gave it to was Alan Dulles. So Dulles knew everything about the German technology. He knew about Magenta, the reverse engineering project, and then transformed that into the OSS and into the CIA.
That's fascinating. That is really fascinating.
Geoff, I just wanted to mention in Timothy Good's book, Earth and Alien Enterprise, he mentions that there were 4 meetings that Eisenhower had with the visitors, 2 with the Nordic group and 2 with the Greys. And I had a chance to talk to Nick Redfern, who's on the Ancient Aliens program.
Right.
And Nick told me that he knew Timothy Good very well. And he said if Timothy said that there were 4 meetings, Timothy saw evidence of that before he would even put it in his book. So apparently that is a true fact.
Yeah.
Is Timothy good? Did he die?
I don't know. He stopped printing or writing books, and he's basically reclusive now. But Nick Redfern told me he knew him very well. And he said if he said that Eisenhower had 4 meetings with visitors, 2 with Nordics and 2 with Greys, those meetings happened.
Wow. Okay. Sorry, Geoff, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
But the Washington flyover on consecutive weekends, as the military call it, that's a show of force. They had to start negotiating, and that's where I believe Eisenhower came into it. You've got these objects that are flying with impunity directly over the Capitol in July of 1952. You'd have to go and see what they wanted, because obviously they demonstrate technologies that are far and beyond anyone on Earth could have created at that time. So, yeah, I mean, 5-star General Eisenhower, what else could he do? He'd have to go and negotiate and see exactly what their intentions were. And maybe there was some sort of deal negotiated, because apparently Aztec and I believe Roswell, they found human bodies in both those crashes. So if it was for scientific study or something else, that was a problem. And I think that's why James Forrestal had a nervous breakdown towards the end. Some of the stuff they discovered, particularly Aztec, they said was most disturbing. Probably sent a lot of people over the edge. And so, that was all they could do was negotiate and find out what their intent was.
So at the Aztec crash, they had actually people that were abducted for experimentation or whatever.
I think the saying was they were dissected like you would a frog.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Vivisection.
Yeah.
Now this is okay. I mean, this is fascinating because again, these are little pieces of data that have been like breadcrumbs, and if you follow them, you're going to eventually get to the mother lode. And it looks like heading in that direction right now, which begs the issue. And let me be a little controversial here. If you look at the world around you and you try to make sense of it, most of it doesn't really make any sense. I mean, at the level that we see, okay, that we observe, could there be a extraterrestrial, or in John's case, a demonic entity that is actually manipulating world events right now, to a point that we have no choice but follow the directives that we're seeing. Does that sound
That's what it appears to be.
What is demonic? Define.
Well, I don't know. I mean, if we jump into quantum physics, if we go the multiverse and everything else like that, I mean, if you can jump from one to another and you're an alien entity and you're billions of years ahead of us, does that give you the powers of a god or a demon? I don't know, but it may. Maybe it's vernacular, maybe it's the terminology that we're using is what we have, well, all that we have, in order to pigeonhole things into something we can deal with, at that level.
If
So
it's
go ahead.
sorry, if it's of any use to you, demon comes from the term daemon, which is a controller and influencer.
Okay, is that a Greek root?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I guess Plato or Aristotle or any of those guys, they spent a lot of time thinking, didn't they?
Sure did.
What did you come up with? Okay.
Another
I think
question.
that's what scared a lot of people too, was the fact that the craft that they found in both Aztec and Roswell were relatively small, and they didn't have much facilities in the way of logistics stores. So they weren't interplanetary as such. They were short range vehicles that appeared, and the only food source that they appeared to have was dissected humans. So probably
Great.
that's probably considered demonic, I guess.
Well, definitely there's a food chain issue there.
Mm.
We're not at the top of it, apparently.
I got a
No,
question.
that's right.
Question two.
Yes,
I never heard about the Aztec crash. When and where was that?
that was what, 46, 45?
Where
I
was
think
it?
it was April 48 in
Oh,
Aztec, New Mexico.
Oh, okay.
A question
Mm.
about crop circles. What in the world, what is the messages? The people have videotaped them being made. Looks like the light
Mm.
sources are taking the plants and bending them, and the shapes are phenomenal. The graphic shapes,
yeah.
and I'm just wondering, Geoff, do you have any information on what is going on here, and what are the messages? Does anybody have any clue? Crop circles?
That again, that important memo from Scotty Myler, 1999, says that they were manipulating the food supply out, and that's why they have cattle mutilations, crop circles. I'm not sure if it's humans contaminating their own food supply with microplastics and Roundup chemicals that get sprayed across and genetically modified wheat and those types of things. But that's pretty much what he said 25, 26 years ago now, that our food chain was about to collapse, and it was either through manipulation by he called them EBEs, extraterrestrial biological entities, or just by our own, blundering into our own demise type of thing. But maybe that's why they make all the patterns and do all that with the crop circles. Not really sure.
Nick and Jeff and Joe, somebody close to Dr. Jack Sarfati told me that Sarfati said that these crop circles are teaching us advanced physics.
I would buy that. Not all of them, though, I don't think.
Well, the ones that are not man-made, the ones that are not man-made.
Well, here's the thing. There's I can only deal with something I've seen with my own eyes or felt or tasted or whatever. And because of the 1958 incident on along the Navy Road where I lived on Dorbrook Farm.
Yeah.
That took place in July of 1958. Okay, silver sphere flying along the Navy Road. Years later, in 2002, I would go out there. My daughter learned to swim on the farm that I lived on when I was a kid. And 2002, a crop circle showed up about 200 yards behind where my house was. Now, 2002, they also tore down the house I lived in, little cottage, a little farm cottage. But the interesting thing about that crop circle, first of all, full disclosure, 2002, the movie Signs came out with Mel
Yeah.
Gibson.
Yep.
But interestingly, that crop circle was also only about 300 or 400 yards from the Navy Road, but it was also about 200 or 300 yards from the Swimming River Reservoir. Now, UFOs have been 75% of the UFO activity has taken place within close proximity to water, over the ocean, rivers, lakes, and so on. The UFO activity there, it seemed like the crop circle was pointing towards the reservoir. Okay, and it was basically two balls. It almost looked like a dumbbell pointing in the direction of the reservoir. Now, the interesting thing is that crop circle was mowed flat at the request of the director of the Monmouth County Park System. I guess because they didn't want people out there traipsing through or whatever. And apparently a couple years later, I said, well, I tried contacting Nancy Talbot, who at the time was kind of the de facto expert with crop circles around the world. She was very involved in it. And she didn't have a chance to get there, so she didn't see it. But it was years later I talked to somebody and said, no, somebody did go there and they did investigate it. And they found out that there was some type of magnetic or radioactive residue or something. I can't say whether that's true or not, but that's what I was told. So that crop circle may have been nothing more than a marker pointing out where the water was. Maybe they have to fill up a tank of water if they go, for their propulsion system or whatever. So I don't know. I mean, it seemed plausible, but the fact that it was also right there at the site of that UFO sighting, and then in 1970, also adjacent to the Navy Road, the worst accident in Nike history took place. Nike Ajax battery blew up, killing 10 men, 6 soldiers, 4 DoD civilians. And then a couple years later, there was actually, or a short time later, there was a landing about 1.5 miles away from the Navy Pier. And the police chief, I just checked out the article on it, and I'm getting ready to get the police reports because the police were actually called in, and it was investigated.
Just a very simplified explanation. If the crop circles are there to teach quantum physics, I believe you said, could the very early ones and very simple ones be a test to see if we could understand them?
Could very well be. And it was not quantum physics, advanced physics.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, a matter of fact, in England, I think there was that one. It was amazing the amount of work that would go into setting a digital image the way they did of an alien face.
That's right.
Digitized alien face. You could only do it from space. If they had the technology and all, it could have been done from space.
And the man-made circles, the actual stalks break and the crop dies. The ones that are made by other means, the stalks are not broken. They're weaved in a certain pattern and they continue to grow and can be harvested.
Yeah,
that's right, Frank.
And they can be developed and done really quickly with very intricate, incredibly intricate graphic designing and appearing in such a time that it seems impossible but there they are. And
right.
People photograph them, and it's like part of the language, perhaps, of communication. It's just an interesting subject.
Yeah.
There is.
Jeff, Australia, do they have crop circle events taking
Yep.
place there too?
Yeah, there's a famous one, Tully, Queensland. Bill Chalker covered that extensively. That was in the 1970s, I believe, and he's covered that extensively. Yeah.
Thank you.
How many are familiar with the key-shaped crop circle in England that was made around 1992? It has 3 teeth on it and a shaft and a circle at the other end. Well, that is in the shape of the Mount Eve in New York State. Mount Eve is shaped in that exact same pattern. And right next to it, there's a pyramidal mountain, a stepped pyramid called Mount Adam. And why would the early settlers of that period name 2 strange mountains, Mount Adam and Mount Eve?
Fascinating.
Oh, mysteries. Here we are trying to solve mysteries. All we do is create more.
One question, and then you have an answer, and then you have 10 more questions. That's how it goes here.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a fascinating. I'm willing to keep the bridge up. Whoever would like to stay on. Jeff, I don't know if we've exhausted you or not, but
No, that's fine. I do have to go, but unfortunately.
it's been a pleasure having you on, and hopefully you'll be back again. I'd love to hear a report on how your things are going when you go to Canada, and as you refine your process. I think you're doing yeoman's work, pardon the expression, putting out all this information.
Yeah. No, it's good that there's like-minded people around the planet that are interested in this subject, because it's something that affects us all.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get to the bottom of it soon.
Yeah.
And we have conversations about UFOs around our circular coffee tables.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeff, if you just bear with me 1 minute here. There's one or two folks that have not had a chance to weigh in. And I like to give everybody a chance to comment or question. So, Kathy, you're out there.
Hi, good evening. Good evening. Yes. It's really, it's either it's a puzzle we're trying to put together, and either there's no puzzle pieces to put in there yet, or now we have the pieces, but where do they quite fit? But it's always fascinating. And, the more people have to come together and they all have their little piece of the puzzle, the bigger part of the whole situation, makes more clear, which is really nice because we've all had experiences, great or small. So, and, we are out there, there's other people that believe in other things too. And the rest of the world just live in their little box, and that's probably where they're going to stay. So,
well, yes. And I think we're doing our part, asking the questions and listening to the smart people as they bring things forward to us. And we're getting it not necessarily from the areas that we would normally expect, and I think that's exciting. So thank you for that. Stanley Nazemic, how about a closing thought?
I think overall it's been very interesting. We opened quite a few more doors, and we'll keep on opening doors until we find the right door to open and get inside and get all the information we need.
Now we're going to kick them down.
There you go. You got it.
Okay. Well, everybody, Frank, you like to finish up, or?
I just appreciate the open conversation and how receptive people are to examining different possibilities and expanding consciousness and awareness.
Yeah, absolutely, Frank. Total agreement with you.
Thank you, Frank.
You're welcome.
See you again.
Yes.
Okay,
Good
well,
to see you.
whoever, if you want to stay on, like I said, I'll keep it up for a while, even though I haven't had dinner yet.
Neither have I.
Well, my chair is giving me a pain in the what, so I think I'm going to.
Okay, I think we voted to end the discussion tonight. Jeff, thanks again.
Thank you.
I'll be posting this. I'll send the link so everybody can sharing it. Some of it, I apologize, I did not turn it on from the very beginning. So I unfortunately
That's fine.
I did not get the video captured, but all the conversation afterwards we do have. So
Okay.
We'll put that link up for that YouTube video too, Joe.
oh yeah,
It's unlisted at the moment, but if you've got the link, you should be able to click on it and go straight to the video. Yep.
yeah, I'll put that in too. You'll have
Yeah,
both.
send it out.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And
Excellent. Thanks, Joe.
next month I'll be sending out.
Thank you, Jeff, for helping talking to us.
Yeah, and Jeff, I'm going
No
to
worries.
keep you on the email list, and you're welcome to join anytime. And we would always
Excellent.
like to hear from you.
Yep, definitely.
Okay, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay, good night.
Thank
you, Jeff.
Thank you,
Thank you, Jeff.
Joe.
Thanks again.
Thank
Have a great
you.
night.